Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Michael Green, Executive Director of the Social Progress Imperative. And I'd like to begin by introducing you to an extraordinary social innovator, an inspirational pioneer to follow the theme of our day. But he's rather an unusual social innovator because he's been dead for 300 years. The innovator I'd like to introduce you to is a man called William Petty. Now, William Petty looks very plutocratic and sort of terribly serious in his big wig. But he was actually born in very humble circumstances in England in the 17th century. And he, as a young man, couldn't go to school, so he had to go and join the Navy. And there in the Navy, he had a lucky accident. He broke his leg and was bedridden for several weeks. And there he started to read. And he became engaged in scholarship. And he was a brilliant scholar, winning a place at Oxford University and ultimately becoming a professor of anatomy at the early age of 28. And to understand how brilliant that is, Geoffrey Sachs was a professor at the age of 28. So William Petty is as brilliant as Geoffrey Sachs. But he also got bored. He got bored with being a professor of anatomy. And so he decided he was going to join the army and join the British invasion of Ireland under the British leader Oliver Cromwell. So off he went to Ireland. It was a brutal campaign, but Cromwell conquered the whole of Ireland. And he gave Petty, the scientist, a job. He said, how much is this worth? We've got to divide up to pay off our soldiers. How much is Ireland worth? And this is where Petty had a brilliant idea. Because until then, in economics and statistics, the idea of what a country was worth was how much gold is there in the treasury? How much land is there? How many buildings are there? But what Petty realized was that the value of a country, of a society, is about the productive potential of its people to use those assets. This was an extraordinary breakthrough in economics, so sort of a measurement revolution in economics about how we understand what a society is and what productivity is. And Petty's work was influential in that great thinker Adam Smith's work. The Wealth of Nations was fundamentally based on the statistics that Petty developed, the measurement revolution led by Petty. We fast forward 150 years, and there's another measurement revolution. This time, it's led by an American economist called Simon Kuznets. And Simon Kuznets produces in 1934, in January, a report that is titled National Income 1929 to 1932. Now, this report may look very, very boring. And it is, because I've read it. But this report is the basis of how today every country measures its success, gross domestic product. Kuznets' report was commissioned because the US economy was, of course, in the crisis of the Great Depression. Policymakers didn't have real data to understand what was going on in the economy during this crisis. What Kuznets did by creating these measures of national income was useful, powerful information to help with the management of the economy that eventually lifted the United States out of the Great Depression. And so useful was this innovation that it spread to many other countries, spread around the world, so that today every country produces GDP statistics. Most of them reliable, some of them not so much, maybe in Argentina. So GDP is there, it's everywhere in our world. But GDP has come to dominate our world. Governments rise and fall on whether GDP is going up or down. Trillions of dollars flow across borders and markets move based on which countries are up or down, all measured in GDP. Our world is marching to the drumbeat of economic growth measured in terms of getting more GDP. But we know that GDP is flawed. It's blind to environmental issues. It counts bombs and prisons as progress. It says nothing about friendship or community, and nothing about fairness or justice. And don't just take my word about this, take Kuznets' word. Here, in his first report, in 1934, he said, The welfare of a nation can therefore scarcely be inferred from a measurement of national income as defined above. It's not the greatest soundbite in the world. Economists aren't really known for that. But his message is very, very clear. GDP was created as a tool to help us manage the economy, not as the measure of the well-being of our societies. And we have to understand that our fetish for GDP has created so many of the problems that the world is experiencing now. And that's why it's time to move beyond GDP. Now, Kuznets issued his warning 80 years ago, and there have been efforts to move beyond GDP before. But I believe we are now living in the moment when we're ready for a measurement revolution. We're ready because, as we've heard repeatedly today, we're running up against environmental limits. We're ready because we've seen how far the fetish for economic growth can lead our economies astray. Just look at the financial crisis of 2008. We're ready because we've seen in the Arab Spring how countries like Tunisia, that were supposed to be economic superstars, were in fact societies falling apart. We're ready because today we have ways of gathering and analyzing data that would have been unimaginable to Kuznets. I want today to talk to you about this measurement revolution, what we call the Social Progress Index. It's a measure of the performance of societies based entirely on the real things that matter to real people. We measure the outcomes societies achieve in terms of people's lives. We don't measure how much money is spent or which laws are passed. We measure people's real quality of life. And we measure that across 3 different dimensions of what we think makes a good society. The first is, does everyone have the basic needs for survival? Food, water, shelter, safety. Secondly, does everyone have the building blocks to build a better future for themselves? Education, access to information, health, and a sustainable environment. And then third, can everyone freely pursue their dreams as they wish? Do they have rights, freedom of choice, freedom from discrimination, and access to the world's most advanced knowledge? So with these underlying indicators, we bring this together to be able to assess countries and create a measure of a country's social progress. Do you want to know who came top? No? Okay, I'll skip that bit. Right, so who came top? Let me show you on this chart. So on this chart, I've put social progress on the vertical axis. So higher is better, more social progress. Then on the horizontal axis, I've put GDP per capita. Now this is just for fun, just for comparison. So we're not measuring GDP per capita, we're just comparing it to social progress. Higher is better on social progress. Okay, so the country in the world with the highest social progress is, I'm sorry, not Switzerland, it's New Zealand, okay? And the country in the world, I'm sorry to say, with the least social progress is Chad. Now, I know, from my conversations today, how clever the students of St.Gallen are. So I know you'll be thinking, but aha, New Zealand has a higher GDP than Chad. It's a good point, well made. But I've been naughty, I haven't shown you some other countries. Here's the United States, yeah? A lot richer than New Zealand, but with a lower level of social progress. And then here's Senegal. Senegal's got the same level of GDP as Chad, but a higher level of social progress. So what's going on? What I'll do now is bring in all the other countries of the world, each represented by a dot, the 132 countries that we've been able to measure, okay? So how does Switzerland do? Well, second. The 2015 index comes in 2 months. 2 months' time, check out, see how you do, see how you do. And I don't know the answers. Don't try and get the answer out of me. We haven't calculated it yet. So Switzerland comes second. The best performing of the G7 economies is Canada, followed then by Germany, and then of the other G7 countries, my country, the UK, just below Germany. Yet again, we lose on penalties to the Germans. But we don't really care because we beat the French. And then there's a strong Latin American theme. There's some very interesting news, important, good news for Latin America if we're looking at the emerging economies. Because of the BRICS economies, the best performing is Brazil. Cheer, come on. Beating South Africa, Russia, China, and India. Yeah? You see there's a little dot out on the far right-hand side, country with a lot of GDP, but not an impressive amount of social progress given how rich it is. That is Kuwait. And tucked above Brazil, there is a dot there of a country with even more social progress than Brazil at a similar level of GDP. That is the social progress superpower that is Costa Rica. So, those are the various countries. What I'll do is let me just pull out a couple of themes by taking away these countries and putting in the regression line that shows the average relationship between GDP and social progress. And the first thing I want to highlight is there's noise around the curve. Yeah? And what that means, what that empirically demonstrates, is that GDP is not destiny. At any level of GDP, there are opportunities to have more social progress, risks of having less. We have choices. The second thing to highlight is that actually, let's take consolation. Economic growth is not bad for us, especially if you're a poor country. Look at below $10,000 a year of GDP per capita. At that level, a little bit of economic growth with the right policies can lead to a lot of social progress bang for your GDP buck. But then we see beyond $10,000, the curve starts to slow down as it gets harder and harder to get social progress. And this also shows us that GDP, as we get richer, as the world gets richer, as more of us live on this higher part of the curve, is going to become less and less useful as a guide to the future, a guide to policy. Let me give you a practical example. Picking Brazil. Brazil's above the curve. It's got a social progress of about 70, GDP about coming up $15,000 a year. So the question is, where does Brazil want to go next? Now, let's say the government passes an ambitious ambitious plan to double GDP over the next 10 years. Great, fine, not a bad idea. But to just have a GDP target is only half a plan. Because where does Brazil want to go on social progress? It doesn't want to become like Russia. Yeah? It wants to become like New Zealand. So as countries develop, they need to have a holistic plan that combines a strategy for economic development and social progress. And the Social Progress Index has been designed to help countries to do that. Because what we can do, as well as showing an aggregate score, we can show how a country is performing across all the different dimensions of social progress. And there's a scorecard like this for every country in the index that can really be there as a guide and a help to policymakers, to business, to civil society, to see where priorities are. And also, Brazil's a big place. So what we can also do is break it down geographically. Here's the Social Progress Index that was created last year for the Amazon region of Brazil by Tasso and his colleagues at Amazon. So here we've got really detailed, granular information down to the level of 772 municipalities in this region. So tools to actually help come up with strategies to advance social progress for countries. And this is what we call the Social Progress Imperative movement. The Social Progress Index reframes how we define development. We harness that to innovative tools like the Amazon Index, and then bring together action networks of people within the country spanning government, business, and civil society to work together to drive social progress. We've been working at this for less than 2 years now, and in Latin America, we're now in 10 countries. Actually, I lie. Overnight, I heard we're now in Argentina. We're now in 11 countries. And I think it's spread so quickly because the movement is led by the people in the countries. All the innovations in how the tool has been used has come from people in the countries. Martin Burt is somewhere here. He's doing fantastic things in Paraguay, adapting the social progress tool down to the household level. Emmanuel from Guatemala is somewhere. Here we are. he told me yesterday he's got 5 projects in Guatemala. I said, oh, I thought you had 1. Yeah? It's all a movement being led by people in the countries themselves, coming up with strategies to use the tools to advance social progress. So that's Latin America. Where's next? United States. We will be making announcements soon about the United States, about the European Union. And then after that, who are next? India, maybe? Maybe South Africa? Maybe China? Maybe even Switzerland. And if you want to come and join us, come to the roundtable tomorrow, and we can talk about Social Progress Switzerland. Or if you're watching online, email me, tweet me, because this is a movement that we want to bring people together, to combine together, to make this century the century of social progress. Thank you.